It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. Julie Luoma is helping people to make their dreams come true through the company she and her husband own, Off the Wall Quilt. I meant to ask her about the video that her family made to advertise Off the Wall Quilt, but we got busy talking about so many other things. So you'll have to go on her website and check that out. I enjoyed it so much. Not only is it informational, it's hilarious. Julie, thank you for spending your time and sharing with me on A Quilter's Life.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This is going to be fun, getting to chat a little bit.
I'm so looking forward to it. Where were you born and raised?
I was actually born in downtown Seattle, so truly I was a Seattle native and spent my first 5 years in Seattle, and then we moved just outside of Seattle over by SeaTac Airport. Everybody's flown through SeaTac Airport, I think, and grew up there, went to school there until I was like 18.
Do you have a special childhood memory there?
You know, I was thinking about that. I grew up in a great neighborhood full of kids. And at some point, someone gave our family a little wading pool. It was, 2 or 3 feet deep and 8 feet across. And I think the whole neighborhood would get in. We had a great time splashing around in that pool and acting crazy. And I just remember my mom hated it because it made a big dead circle in the backyard, which wasn't landscaped. It wasn't that nice, but that drove her nuts. Isn't that funny, the stuff you remember?
So was it just up the 1 year?
No, we had it for several years, and it was just a little vinyl liner with like an aluminum corrugated outside of it, and real simple. And I have no idea where it came from. Maybe my mom remembers, but we were good at putting it up. I had 4 siblings, and we'd put it up and we'd beg our parents to let us fill it with water because, water's expensive and it was going to kill the lawn, but hours of fun. And I think we could fit 100 neighborhood kids in there. Probably not that many, but.
So after high school, where did you go?
I went to Lutheran Bible Institute for a year, and then I was never very much in love with school. So I had an opportunity to go to Mexico, and I first went over the summer on a trip to help out at an orphanage. And then a few months later, I went back and I lived in Mexico for a year, working as a house parent in an orphanage. And I think we had about 35 kids. So we cooked meals. That was always exciting because it was donated food. So you never knew what you got. We had some great churches in Southern California that would do food drives. So think carefully, people, what you donate, okay? But we would make it into meals. And then one time a church came down, a youth group came on spring break and built a chicken coop, which out in rural Mexico, I don't know why they thought we needed a chicken coop, but they stocked it with 100 chickens. So did you know that 100 chickens, when they're young, will give you 150 eggs a day? And you can't sell them out in rural Mexico because there's chickens everywhere. So we didn't want to waste food. So we got really creative about how to cook eggs. And then they decided we had too many, so they slaughtered some, and I was supposed to cook them. I boiled one of them for 3 days, and it never got tender. So I went down there, had a great time, and learned Spanish. So that's been helpful later in life. And I worked in Eastern Washington for a while with immigrants, and worked in California, same kind of a program. So got to meet a lot of people and had a lot of fun, and ended up back in Seattle.
Oh, wow. Now, we know you have a quilting career right now, but did you have employment besides quilting?
Oh, yes. Did a lot of different kinds of jobs, but the 20 years before I started quilting, I was working as a tax professional and business manager. So it's kind of funny because people think I'm such a creative person, but I also loved doing taxes. And I don't know how that works in your brain, but to me, it was almost like a quilt. You take all the pieces and you put it together. And I loved working with the people. My goal was to send every customer out of my office with a smile, whether they owed or were getting a refund. And I did that by making sure they thoroughly understood their tax return and made some great friends over 20 years. When you start doing people's kids' taxes, that's pretty cool. And then I also became a franchise manager and a general manager. So all that was really good preparation to running our own business now. And I do it with my husband, Rick, and he's an engineer. So the rulers are very exciting to him. And we were both working full time. And then I quit working doing taxes and was just kind of working on learning to write patterns. I wrote a book. Somebody told me I would look more official if I wrote a book. So I wrote a book. And then Rick got laid off from his job as an engineer. And we said, we have this little business. We were doing a couple shows a year. Let's grow it, because our dream had always been to work together and to see the United States. So this was the perfect opportunity to jump in the car, the truck, the van, now the big van, and start driving around the US. And so that's kind of how our careers morphed into this, because nobody grows up going, I want to be a quilt show vendor when I grow up.
I don't know why not. My question I have written here is, where do you live now and how did you get there from where you were born and raised? Are you still in the Northwest or are you in Florida?
We're in Florida. The phone numbers really mess people up.
Well, I love your video and it said the Northwest, so that's what.
Yeah, we lived and worked in the Northwest for a long time. And then once we got on the road, we realized it was hard to get to most of the quilt shows from Seattle, especially in the winter and the early spring when shows start up. There was one year where all the main passes closed and we needed to be at a show in another state. So it really made us kind of stop and think. And we happened to be starting out on a 7-week road trip, kind of around the perimeter of the US, going to quilt shows and stopping and seeing family. So our conversation, the whole 7 weeks pretty much was, where do we want to live? We don't have to live in the Northwest anymore. Our kids were all grown and doing well. And so we headed south through Oregon and down through California. Didn't want to live in California. Came across the bottom of the US. New Mexico fascinates me, especially that tree with all the shoes hanging in it on the highway. But honestly, other than that, I can't remember anything about New Mexico. So we tossed that out. So that's kind of what we did as we went. Actually, we looked at it from more of a business perspective, but with a lot of funny commentary along the side, like the shoe tree. So as we went around, we got to Florida, and my husband has some family down here. Plus, this is kind of a funny side story. A long time ago, Rick had been assigned down to work with a company that worked with NASA at Cape Canaveral. So we had come down, our kids were really little, and we stayed for 6 weeks at Cocoa Beach. So a company put us up in a townhouse on the beach. And for fun, we would go over and play at the Space Center. My husband was in and out of the shuttles every day. He was having the time of his life. We forgot he was working. We just had a great time. And it was in the summer, so it was hot in Florida. So we knew what that was like and had a great time. Never thought about moving back here, but we had some experience here in Florida. So then when we were down here visiting, we went, you know what? We always liked it here. What about living in Florida? Well, then some other relatives came down, Rick's brother-in-law and sister, and they said, well, why don't we all move to Florida and Mom will come and it'd be fun if we all finally got to live near each other. And we said, okay, we'll think about that. So we continued up the East Coast and met up again in Chicago with some more family. And Rick's originally from Upper Michigan. So there's that part of the US too. Anyways, when we left Chicago, we said, you know what, let's move to Florida. We just decided to do it. So the couple weeks it took us to drive home from there, we made a plan to move because we couldn't shut down the business because we needed the income. So the market was heating up, thank goodness. But we also, in the middle of that, had a trip planned to South America. So busy 5 months, I'm telling you. But we met with a realtor when we got back and we put a day-to-day plan, when to pack what, and what to do. And it worked. Thank goodness, because our house in Seattle sold in 24 hours. And that was when that big eclipse thing was going on. And I accidentally scheduled our departure day as eclipse day. So we all remember that really well. So that was the day we threw everything in the car and we sent our stuff in pods and we drove across the US. So crazy time. But, we said, does it really matter how far you move if you're moving? You have to pack it all up anyways, right? So let's move as far as we can. We moved across the US with 2 dogs and 3 pods. And anyways, it was crazy fun. It is different here. People always ask, do you like it there? We do. Having grown up in Seattle, the gray weather there never bothered me until we moved to Florida. And now I am so used to seeing the sun just about every day that it does bug me when we have an all gray day. And I think, how did I survive over 50 years in Seattle and it never bothered me? But here we are. The rest of the U.S. at the time of this recording is underneath a huge cold front. And I'm sitting here in shorts talking to you. And it's a little coolish, but I mean, it's in the 60s, so we're not complaining. So yes, I like Florida. Christmas is fun for us. We go to the beach just because we can. So what's wrong with that?
And I woke up to snow on the ground.
Brr, that makes my feet hurt.
Is there anything else about your family you'd like to share?
I grew up in, I guess, what's considered a pretty large family. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. We have 3 kids. So that seems like a small family to me, but a lot of fun. Our daughter lives here in Florida with us and works for us. So when people call customer service and stuff, they're actually usually talking to her. It's been a lot of fun. We miss our boys. They're still up in the Seattle area. Thank goodness one of them works for an airline and can jump on a plane and come see us once in a while. But yeah, other than that, it's fun to get to know kind of the other side of the family. We lived up by my side of the family in Seattle, and now we have other relatives on my husband's side. So no regrets about moving, that's for sure. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Besides quilting, are there other crafts that you have done or that you do?
I think typical of crafty kinds of people, you dabble in a little bit of everything. Like many quilters, I can knit and crochet because you can take that with you. Interestingly, I like to knit better than crochet, which people usually tell me it's the opposite, but I don't know why. I don't do a lot of either. We drive a lot. We drive from show to show. I had this great idea that I could crochet in our van, and I was bored one time, so I went into a Walmart and bought yarn and crochet hook and started messing around. So I say I can crochet, I can make hats and scarves, but I don't think what I do is any real crochet stitch or anything. I think I'm just twisting yarn around. But yeah, I like to play a little bit with paint. And when I was a kid, interestingly enough, my mom sewed a lot of our clothes. Beautiful job. She was a beautiful seamstress. But in my viewpoint as a child, I didn't think she enjoyed it. She seemed grumpy to me and just kind of stay out of her way. So I didn't really learn to sew from her, but I used to make doll clothes all the time from scraps and paper and toilet paper tubes, whatever I could find, paper towels, and I glued it or stapled it. So I guess I've been doing that. I don't sew clothes because I can never find anybody they fit after I make them. Same reason I don't crochet or knit sweaters because they never fit anybody. But yeah, I like to play around with all kinds of stuff, not being good at anything because I don't spend enough time on it. But I like to make art quilts too. That's kind of my not work quilting. It's hard when your business takes over what was your hobby and it's hard to find fun time anymore. So sometimes I just make art quilts just because there's no rules and they're a lot of fun. And I really like texture and dimensions. So I like to add all kinds of things. For example, I have a guitar quilt that's actually made out of guitar pieces. Like there's a real fret and real strings and pegs and stuff on it.
Huh. How about other hobbies?
I used to read a lot. I used to do a lot of things, but quilting kind of consumes my life. I like to garden, which is really different here in Florida than it was in Seattle. Basically in Seattle, in the summertime, you can just pop anything in the ground and it grows. And so we had a nice yard and we grew veggies and stuff. Down here in Florida, I pop something in the ground and it grows really good. And overnight, a bug comes and eats the whole plant. So that's a little discouraging. I'm still trying to figure that out. Plus, we're on the road a lot and it's just hard to take care of things. So I'm kind of turning more to a butterfly garden, but it's also too hot to garden in the summer here. So I kind of am retraining my whole thought process that I need to garden in the winter. So if I have another hobby, if anything, we call it my secret garden. It has more junk in it than plants, but it's fun junk. It looks pretty cool.
My question is, do your hobbies show up in your quilting? And I was trying to picture, you mentioned the guitar quilt, but you didn't have guitar as a hobby. So I guess that's not a hobby showing up.
Actually, I used to play when I was a child, in elementary school, you play an instrument. I played the viola. And when I got to junior high and high school, I wanted to take wood shop, automotive shop, and girls couldn't do that. So I was supposed to take home ec, and that made me so mad. I could make what I wanted to. I could cook. I didn't want to take their silly class. So the only way to get out of home ec was you had to take a language and a music class. So I took French. That's not been real useful to me. And I took orchestra because I'd been playing the viola. So I did that, played viola for a while in the orchestra, and then kind of got tired of that. And so I switched to classical guitar. They actually had a classical guitar class at my high school. It's really easy to switch when you play viola. You can play guitar, I guess. So I did play classical guitar for a long time. So that's kind of where the guitar interest came from. You're right. That is kind of random. I didn't think of that before. But the quilting and the flowers go together really well because I just love random bursts of color. So that's where a lot of that comes from too. I love flowers. They make me sneeze something terrible, but they're pretty to look at. But yeah, that's funny. I go from guitars to flowers just like that.
So who introduced you to quilting, or how did you come to start?
Oh, this is really a crazy story. You sure you want this? You're not going to believe this. I accidentally started quilting. I really didn't have a lot of interest in sewing and none in quilting at all. I had no interest. Really close friend of mine, though, took up quilting. So I would go to quilt shows with her sometimes and quilt shops because I loved color and texture. A really cool thing about quilt shops is they let you touch everything. I love to touch stuff. So I loved going with her. I was always up for that. I can distinctly remember going even to a quilt museum up in La Conner, Washington with her one time. I don't remember what quilts were in there. I didn't care, but I wanted to see that cool old house. So we got to tour this whole really cool old house. So I did stuff with her and was kind of engaged in quilting, but no interest in doing it. I had started a small embroidery business while I was working. And so I would do little shirts and, you do all the towels and all that. That was kind of fun. Wasn't making great money on it, but a little bit. And my friend who quilted all the time went on an extended trip somewhere. And I digitized and embroidered my sister's face as an infant and as a young adult, and then turning 50, her 50th birthday was coming. And I wanted to embroider those and make something out of it. And I knew the kind of fabric I wanted to put it on. It's kind of all monochromatic, but it has some texture to it. So I went to a quilt shop to get fabric. And of course, they don't have that kind of fabric. It's really hard to ask for help when you don't know what you're looking for. I need this fabric, So I don't know why I did this, but I went to Goodwill and I thought I can find maybe a piece of this fabric on a tablecloth or something. And so I did find it, but it was a chair cover, those that they slip over folding chairs and tie the little strings. It was one of those. And later people told me it's called jacquard was the fabric I was looking for. So I find this chair cover and I take it home and I take all the seams out. So then you have this big, weirdly shaped floppy piece of fabric. But I managed to get it in the hoop and embroidered my sister's face on there. And it came out really good. I was really pleased with it. And then I had this giant piece of floppy fabric with my sister's face on it. You can't just hand that to somebody, So I knew I needed to trim it, but I didn't know how big to trim it even. And my friend is gone So I went online. By then, people were using the online stuff a lot. And I found Quilter's discussion board. And from that, found links and found stuff, not a lot of videos yet at that point online, but found instructions to trim this thing down. And I realized I needed to add a border to it. So about that time, I went to a big, it's the Puyallup Sewing Expo in Washington, one of the biggest sewing expos around, and went there to look for embroidery threads and stuff. They didn't have a lot of embroidery there, but was having a good time. And I came around a corner and there's this booth there that had these big, bold, beautiful quilts. I loved them. I'd never seen anything like it. And I said out loud, wow, if I was ever going to quilt, these are the kinds of quilts I would make. Well, Margaret Miller was standing there. She owned Miller Quilts. If you ever knew Margaret, she can just pull you in. She grabbed me and pulled me over and explained how she made these quilts. Didn't understand a word she was saying. Okay. No clue what she was saying. I just knew it was really cool. So I bought this big set of quilting templates and a book for my friend, right? Because I'm that kind of friend. I'll buy it and you can make it for me or something. I don't know what I was thinking. But she came home and she already had that set of templates. So I just hung on to it. I didn't really have any plans for the set. But when I needed to add a border to this embroidered piece, I remembered that I had this set of templates. So I looked up Margaret Miller. She happened to be teaching not too far from where I lived. So I signed up for a class and I went up there and I got there and I forgot the power cord and the pedal for my sewing machine. She kept talking about a 1/4-inch seam. I had no clue what that was. I'd only ever heard of a 5/8 from my mom sewing. And I kind of could use a rotary cutter. Thank goodness I didn't cut my finger off or anything. But Margaret was a great teacher, and the other students in the class were fantastic. The shop owner found me a sewing machine to use. Margaret kept saying to do things like right sides together, wrong sides, do this, do that. And anyways, I learned a lot that day. Enough so that I went home that night and put a border on that quilt and made it a quilt, like a really cool border. I look back at the pictures of it now and I'm like, well, I can't believe I did that the day I learned to piece. So I went back online and learned how to sew it on, sew the border on, and that I needed probably 3 layers and that I needed to figure out how to quilt it. So I did all that from online. I even learned how to do the binding and did all that. So pretty proud of it. And it was done a month before my sister's birthday, which that's never happened again. I can tell you that. And in this quilting board I was on, somebody posted a picture and said, my quilt is in a contest. Go over and vote for it on the McCall's Design Star Quilt Contest. And that was in 2010. So I went over and I looked at her quilt, and this makes me sound really snotty. Okay. And I'm not. This was ignorance. All right. I looked at her quilt and it was pretty cool. But right in the middle of it, she had a block upside down because you could tell from where it was supposed to be going. And I thought, well, if she can enter that in this contest, I can enter mine, the picture of my sister's quilt. So then I read the instruction. You just uploaded a picture and it was juried. And I thought, oh, good. They'll look at it and they'll go, this is a brand new quilter, and they're not going to do anything with it, but I can enter it. It was free. So I uploaded some pictures. And you know what? I got chosen as a finalist.
Wow.
Yeah. Uh-oh. You had to design more quilts. I didn't know how to design quilts. I hardly knew what a quilt was. So my friend came home, thank goodness. As long as you did all the design work, you could have somebody help you piece. So I asked my friend, is there a way that I can do this on the computer? I'm not going to draw all these quilts by hand. And she goes, well, I have this program called Electric Quilt, but I don't know how to use it. And I said, cool. I went and bought it. I downloaded it right there. So I was actually designing quilts before I knew how to quilt. Yeah, crazy, isn't it? And I said to her, now, before I start designing quilts, are there any rules that I need to know? And she thought about it and she said, I think I could probably make anything you can design. I said, cool. So I got in there and learned EQ. And later, my friend told me that she learned a lot that summer because she had no idea I would design crazy stuff that I did. So we would design a quilt and make it and send them pictures. And we kept getting selected for the next round. We just kept winning. And they sent us boxes and boxes of prizes. I didn't even know what this stuff was. Tools and scissors. I think I have 28 pairs of scissors from there. Fabric and books and rulers. It was crazy fun. At the beginning of all that, too, I got laid off from my job. So I actually had a few months and had a lot of fun with her making these quilts. And we kind of started at that point messing around with the idea of maybe starting a business, which is kind of what morphed into what my husband and I have now. But it was great fun. So I kept getting my quilts published in McCall's Quilt magazine. So I would talk to people and they're like, oh, it's just my dream to have my quilts published in a magazine sometime. And I'd be like, what's the big deal? I don't understand. Why is that a big deal? So we made it to the final round. We didn't win the contest, but we did make it to the final. And if you try to look me up in that magazine, you may or may not find me because here's fame for you. They spelled my name wrong. So we had a good laugh about that. Now, I have actually submitted stuff to magazines since then and had it accepted and had patterns printed and stuff. But that's kind of how I accidentally started quilting. And it's just been a riot ever since. So I guess I didn't follow the rules. I didn't start at, my grandmother's feet sewing squares together or anything like that. Just jumped in wild and crazy.
I'm wondering if you were able to go farther in it because you didn't know the rules to follow. So it was something new.
I agree with that because a couple of years into it, I realized that I had slowed down and wasn't as happy with my quilts. And it was because I had started to learn rules and it was very restrictive. And I remember saying to my friend, I hope I get back to the point where I can stop worrying about the rules. Because the rules, some of them are very helpful, but some of them are just a rule that somebody made up or it's the way they quilt. And yeah, it did kill my creativity for a while, but it's farther down the whole story of what we do. But I did get it back. And so, yeah, a lot less rules for me again now. And when I teach, it's really important for me to be about setting people free in their quilting rather than teaching them more rules. Because of that, you really did nail that.
Okay. Whether it's a quilt you made or just another quilt, do you have a favorite quilt?
I kind of have two classifications of quilts. I have my art quilts, and I have favorites in that. And then I have bed quilts, because to me, quilts should be used. It doesn't offend me when someone calls it a blanket, because in my house, they serve the same purpose to keep you warm. And a quilt is a better hug than just a blanket. In my art quilts, I have one that I did a pixelated lion's eye. It was for one of the cherry wood contests. And it has, I forget how many squares in it now, but I started with 1 inch squares. So they're 1/2 inch squares.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was an insane quilt. So it's an eye, but from across the room, it follows you. So I like to put it up somewhere where I'm going to come in and see it because it startles me every once in a while. And I made it. And this eye just kind of looks at you. So, yeah, I would say that was one of my favorites. That probably took me longer than most. I'm pretty fast usually, but sewing all those little tiny squares together, it was something else. And then, you have a limited amount. And I got about 1/3 of it done and realized there was a mistake in the design. And so I took it all apart very carefully and pressed those 1 inch squares and started over. And then I got done and some of them, were a little bit skewed or out of place. The seams didn't match. So I did surgery. I'd take a 1 inch square, a 1/2 inch square out of the middle of this thing and sew it back in. And then I thread painted it when I got done and it skewed the whole thing anyways. So I didn't need to do the little precision surgery on it, but fun project. It was just a fun project. And like I said, it's still one of my favorites.
I am trying to picture the back of that quilt because if you use your 1/4 inch to make it down to a 1/2 inch, that completely covers the back of that square. And then you're doing it for the other angle too. So that's pretty thick.
It is. It's a surprisingly heavy quilt. It's only 20 by 20 and it's heavy. It's a lot of fabric. It wasn't hard to thread paint. I did find that my machine handled it really well, but that was part of the problem to try to keep all the lines straight is because you had so much seam allowance. in there. So, yeah, I'm not going to do it again.
Is there a tool that you're so happy you have?
Yeah, I like my tools. There's two actually that I really like. My husband hand turns seam rippers. I just love using a tool that he made for me. He just made me a new set because the other one I just had for a long time, and I get to see all the pretty ones he makes, and I just wanted a new one. The other one is what I got from Margaret Miller originally were angle play templates. We bought the company from her eventually, Miller Quilts, and we manufacture our own templates now. And those are still my favorite templates. There's just so much you can do. It's an elongated half rectangle. There's so much you can do with that shape. And so it seems like I'm always going back to it. I have to laugh. The quilt I have behind me is one of the very few that I've made and written a pattern for that doesn't have the angle play templates in it. That was a real challenge. I kept thinking, oh, I need to put an angle play right here. But once in a while, I challenge myself to do something a little different. But I just find myself going back to my angle play templates all the time.
Can you describe that quilt so people can see it in their minds?
It is a bunch of half square triangles. It goes with another ruler that we have. So it's got 45-degree angles. I don't even know how to describe it because it's so unusual for me. The funny thing on this one is I did it right as the COVID lockdown started. So it has a lot of Y seams. Every block has Y seams in it. And I didn't think that was a big deal. Again, not knowing the rules is very helpful. I was doing these Y seams and I read a lot of methods, and most of them are just too much trouble and hard to keep accurate. So I really sat down and thought it through, made a lot of blocks, and wanted to teach my daughter how to do it. She's a pretty new quilter and she doesn't quilt a lot. So I needed to really simplify it for her, something that she could do easily and remember. So I actually made up my own method of doing Y seams. So a lot of people look at this quilt and they're like, oh, all those Y seams. And I'm like, it's so much fun. So we have a little video on our website of how to do that. But it's really satisfying trying to explain it. As you come to your stopping point, you bring the fabric around behind your foot and pull on it and it snaps into place. And then you just keep sewing. And when you get the hang of that snap, it's so satisfying. Snap, sew, snap, sew. So we've had a lot of fun with this quilt, and it's up there. It's all quilted. And honestly, though, it doesn't have a binding on it. So it's not officially finished. And I think after this many years, it's time to put the binding on. It's also very colorful. I can't even remember all the colors I used in it. And so I like to put this one up when I'm doing a video too, because it has so many colors. And that's just me. Just love to have all the colors in there. But it is that one that I didn't do angle play in.
With the many steps of quilting, do you like specific steps or do you like each step along the way?
I love picking out the fabrics. I rarely use solids. I love to use the prints and textures on fabrics to help bring dimension to my quilt. So that's really fun. And it always surprises me when people tell me that picking out the fabrics is the hardest part for them, because it's just not for me. I really enjoy the piecing now that I've gotten better at it. I think I didn't like it so much when I first started because I just struggled with the accuracy. And that was kind of during that period too, where I was worried so much about rules. Now I've kind of found out which rules I need to pay the most attention to for piecing. And that's helped a lot. And my piecing, like I said, as it gets better, it makes it more fun. I absolutely don't like binding. That's why my quilt behind me, like I said, isn't bound. My dear friend that I started with, the contest with and stuff, she passed away a few years ago and she spoiled me. She loved hand sewing her binding on. And she also was my long armor. So I would drop off a quilt with a little extra fabric tucked in, and she would quilt it for me and then go watch a movie and sew the binding on. And usually she gave it to me the next day, quilted and bound. Yeah, how spoiled was I with that? So I also didn't really get good at binding because I never had to do it, but I'm getting better at it. I would still always choose not to do the binding if I had a choice.
What was your worst quilting experience?
It was actually before I started quilting. This friend of mine and I were camping, and in the campground, they had this quilting class, and my friend really wanted to do it. So I went along with her to do it and said, well, I don't have a clue what's going on. You'll have to help me. Honestly, the teacher should probably get the worst teacher of the century award. When I think back on it now, I couldn't understand what she was talking about, but that was okay because I didn't know how to quilt. So I just assumed I didn't know what she was talking about. But she would also come around and tell me how stupid I was, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't even be in here. And I wasn't asking her questions. I wasn't interfering with anything because my friend would just help me. Well, then my friend started getting frustrated because she couldn't follow the instructions either. And looking around the room, nobody was able to do the project. Looking back, I can kind of feel sorry for the instructor. She shouldn't have been teaching that class. But at the same time, instructors should never treat students like that. And really, after that, I never wanted to quilt. I still loved supporting my friend in it, but it was very distasteful to me. So really grateful that I met Margaret Miller and she convinced me to use all the colors in the rainbow. And it has also shaped who I am and how I teach. I tell my students at the beginning of my classes that if you're not having fun in my class, it's my fault, not yours. And I need to know. And you're going to leave here with whatever measure of success you want, but you'll have success and we're going to have fun and we're going to laugh together. And you're never going to make a mistake that I haven't already made. I've made a lot. So yeah, I've tried to make that bad experience into a good one because thank goodness I didn't walk away from quilting because of that one bad experience.
Yeah, that could really turn you. What do you think has drawn you to become a quilter and keeps you wanting to quilt? Why would you want to spend your time quilting rather than doing something else?
Well, quilting is a lot more fun than cleaning toilets. That's for sure. It really gives me a creative outlet, and it's something that I can do at home by myself, when there's no one around. But at the same time, the community of quilters is great fun. We we were at Glacier National Park one time, and we were going to take a tour in one of their open red cars. They're so cool. We were the first ones at the first stop that got in. At the next stop, there was a family, and one of the ladies had on a quilting T-shirt. And we were instantly friends, and our whole families were friends. And we were having so much fun in this car that at the third stop, this couple actually ran up and said, I want to be in this car. You're having so much fun. So they sold her a ticket and she jumped in with us. So she wasn't a quilter, but she could just tell. She thought we were all friends traveling together. And we had just met on the sidewalk a couple miles back. So to me, that's kind of what quilting is. Oh, you're a quilter. We're friends. We're probably family too. But at the same time, like I said, it can just be me. I don't have to do it the way other people do. I can do it at home. I can have all my colors and my textures. So it really kind of meets a lot of needs for me, I think. And boy, instant friendship. I don't belong to any guilds or anything because I'm on the road so much. I've joined 2 or 3 guilds and never made a meeting even because I'm gone all the time. But you don't have to. You meet quilters everywhere. We have a crazy bright colored Sprinter van. We had it wrapped in one of my quilt designs. So literally we pull up at a stop, a rest area or a gas station, and people come running over to talk to us. Quilting is just everywhere. It's just a lot of fun.
At the end, we'll share your website, but yeah, people need to go see that van.
The van, yeah.
Besides making quilts to show other people your patterns, who do you usually make your quilts for?
I don't make a lot of quilts for other people. I do some for charities. One of my very first quilts I made the mistake of giving to someone who doesn't like quilts. And so that's one of the things I always talk about in my lectures is don't give quilts to people that don't like quilts because you'll be disappointed and they'll just trash all your work and your time. I've made a couple commission quilts and that was a lot of pressure and wasn't my most creative self either. So I don't make a lot of quilts for other people. I will ask sometimes if people would like a quilt, I had probably the most fun last year, made a couple for a couple of children that are family members. They weren't expecting anything. I just found out what they were into and made a couple of simple quilts from them. And I just found great joy in that because, one had roads on it and one had trains on it because he was into trains. And they weren't going to be critical. I told their mom, let them drag them around on the floor, make forts out of them. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. And now I have all these art quilts too. So we use those to decorate in our house. I'm making a giant peacock one right now for our house, which goes with nothing. I don't have a need to coordinate my interior. An interior designer would go crazy in my house. So yeah, never thought about that.
Well, I used to ask, what are you working on right now? But interviewing these quilters that have quilting as a business, I think I'm starting to ask, how many projects do you have going on right now?
Oh, I can't even count. I'm really glad that this is just recorded because my sewing room is to me, it's a happy chaos. I have about 20 feet of mounted design wall, but I have to use my portable freestanding design wall too because I never have enough room on it. I've been learning to paper piece the last few months. So I have this giant paper piece project on one design wall. I have a baby quilt on another one. That's not for any special baby. I made a baby quilt. And I have a couple of art quilts going, but I actually do have a specific project I'm working on. Unusual for me, I have made some Christmas gifts, and we have a line called Less Than Traditional. It's a super easy way to make orange peel blocks. And one of our most popular demonstration pieces has been these pillows that you make out of them. And they're really fun because it's a little cover. So you make a little pillow and then you make these covers. So for Christmas, all the moms are getting a little pillow and covers for different seasons to go on the pillows. So I was just finishing all the different covers. And I'm telling you, it's really addicting. I think I've made 15 of these covers in the last couple of weeks. For me, it's something I can finish because I don't have long periods to sit and just work on quilting anymore. And they're just going to be so cute. And so now I have to make a set for me that hopefully my dog doesn't like because she'll drag it outside.
I just saw on Facebook a quilter had given her son a quilt and his dog got a hold of it. So there's this huge hole in the quilt she'd just given him. So she put a huge label over it, sewed it on, and it said, "This is why you can't have nice things."
That reminded me of something I'd forgotten. This friend that quilted all the time used to go camping with us. And back when we just had one kid, we had this huge 10-person tent. And so my husband and son and I would go with this friend. So we had plenty of room in this tent. But my husband and I were always fighting over the covers on our sleeping bags. We had zipped them together, but they'd come off. So she made us a huge quilt. I don't know what the measurements were even, but it had to be tied even. She couldn't put it on a machine. So this thing was big. And we could wrap it over the both of us and tuck it in on both sides. So we didn't fight over it anymore. So eventually we graduated to a tent trailer. And we loved that quilt because it could tuck in all around the bed and all the kids could get in it or under it with us. Well, one year when the tent trailer was stored, a mouse couple moved in and chewed a hole in that quilt. So she always wanted to take the quilt and patch it. And we didn't want her to because when we discovered the mice in the tent trailer, my husband and I, who are not small by any means, were chasing this mouse around in the tent trailer, trying to get it out or catch it or something. And we were crashing into each other and laughing so hard. So that hole in that quilt was a wonderful memory for us. I did just give it to somebody else who wanted it for something. And so I did patch it before I gave it to her, but we loved the hole in the quilt.
That sounds like a good title of a book.
Yeah.
The hole in the quilt. Oh. Please share a quilting tip.
When I teach classes, people tell me it's worth the price of my classes to tell them this. I do a lot of applique. And so when you applique, you're going to goober your iron from the adhesives you can get on the bottom of your iron. And there's lots of great products out there. But I want my iron to be clean right now so I can continue doing what I'm doing. So I actually use Magic Eraser by Mr. Clean. And I keep one of those in my sewing room. And you can wipe goobers off of your iron while it's still hot. You just wipe it off. Don't burn your fingers, but just wipe it off. And your iron is instantly clean. It'll take anything off. So I always tell people, absolute tool that you have to have in your sewing room is a Mr. Clean sponge. Also, if you're using a pressing sheet, and sometimes you get the adhesive on the pressing sheet, it'll wipe right off with that Mr. Clean sponge. I've used it to clean the surface of my pressing table. You know, when I forget to put the applique sheet down and I get it on there. I've used it to clean off my light table. I even use it to clean up around my sewing machine a little bit. You know, sometimes you get some stuff on there. I have run needles through it that got stuff on them. You just put it in there and pull it back out and it gets clean. So I don't know if that's so much of a quilting tip as a really handy tool to keep stuff sharp and clean and working well when you're quilting.
That's a great tip. I had never heard of that before, so that's really neat.
Yeah, just don't get an off-brand. I've tried it. Bad idea.
That's
one thing that's, yes, some of the off-brands melt.
Huh.
Yeah, that's bad. But the Mr. Clean will take it off.
Describe how you went from having quilting as a hobby to having quilting as a business.
Boy, I never did that intentionally. Like I said, I was unemployed while I was learning how to quilt. So these two friends that I was quilting with, we talked about maybe developing some patterns and stuff. Well, I ended up going back to work and people's lives go different directions. But then I met up with Margaret Miller again of Miller Quilts, and she invited me to come to her instructor certification for angle play, to be a certified angle play instructor. And so I did and had a great time, and we became friends. And she said to me, I'm looking to sell my business. Would you be interested? Of course, now I look back and think, oh, we had no idea what we were getting into. But we did. So we bought her business from her and we just went to some shows that she had already signed up for, learned about ordering templates and publishing patterns. From there, it was really difficult the way we had to order the templates and very expensive. And I just couldn't see how we would get ahead. So we bought our own laser cutter and started cutting our own. Then somebody told me that if I wanted to be a teacher at shows and go around to guilds and be a speaker, that I would look more official if I had a book published. So about then I had decided to retire from my job doing taxes. So I looked into book publishing and I found out that, in my opinion, people who publish quilting books got paid dust. It just wasn't worth it. Why would you do that? And they told me for the exposure and that stuff. And I'm like, well, what other ways can you do it? So I looked into self-publishing and decided I could probably learn to do that. So I published a book. And it's so funny because it did open doors for me. People would be like, oh, you're a published author. And I'm thinking in my head, well, anybody can publish a book. But it was fun. I've done a couple since then. So we started doing some more shows, but my husband was still working full time. But it was fun and teaching classes. And then when he got a layoff notice very unexpectedly from his job, like I said, we decided to do this full time and kind of start living our dreams. So since then, we've bought 3 other businesses and melded them into one. We do a lot of laser cutting now. We have a lot more than our one. We still have our original little one, our baby. We call it the baby. We cut all of our own rulers. We have several lines of rulers and we cut for other people. We do custom stuff. So the business has grown. It's grown ways we didn't expect. I still go back to my favorite all the time angle play though, and we still teach and make those, but with a lot of other tools and things like that now. So a lot of the business stuff we've developed though has come because I am a quilter and I do use our tools. So we only add businesses that really make sense to me. As a quilter, our rulers get revised all the time. We listen to our customers. All of our original work now is pretty much customer driven, unless I happen to need something. So it's a lot of fun. It really gives both of us a chance to use our skills. My husband was an aerospace engineer. So let me tell you, that comes in really handy. People give him drawings on napkins or just explain their dreams to him. and he can make all those angles perfect and make them work. And so that's kind of a unique thing about us too, that we offer those engineering techniques as well. So yeah, just kind of using everything we've learned and all the jobs that we've had and being able to make it into a business and make this our life is really a dream come true. And not even the dream we knew we didn't even have the dream. We didn't know what the dream was, and we're still building it.
It's interesting. Some couples can work together and some couples cannot. My husband and I have our business here from home, and we just can't picture not working together. So it is really cool that you can work with your husband. What is the name of your business, and how did you come up with that name?
It's really funny because it's not what people think. We're called Off the Wall Quilt. And people think it's because we're a little quirky, and we are, okay? And we love that. We kind of go with it. But originally, it came because I started as a quilt designer, even before I knew how to piece. So I was always designing quilts up on the wall. I cut a piece, I put it on the wall. I sew some together, I put them on the wall. Well, our kids were still in high school and stuff, and they like to wander through. Oh, I should tell you, my sewing room was what other people would use as the formal living room. So right, where everybody had access, which is a great place for mom to be. And so the kids or my husband would walk through, and they like to change pieces around. So they were always helping me design stuff. But I always said, okay, we've done enough designing and playing. At some point, you have to take it off the wall and quilt it. So that's actually where the off the wall came from, but nobody gets it. And it's become a lot more than that. And we have a lot of fun with it. But I still like to design on the wall. And we also now make and sell the only portable freestanding design walls out there. That's why we had to buy that company when it was offered to us, because it was like, oh, that's us, walls, get it? So yeah, that's where it came from. But we are a little off the wall too.
You're right. That was my first thought with your name. How many companies have you acquired?
Okay, so we started with Miller Quilts. That's the angle play stuff. We purchased a company called Ruler Magic, and that's a liquid that you can put on the back of an acrylic ruler, and it dries a little bit tacky so they don't slip. That one's been really fun for us. And then we did Cheryl Ann's portable design walls. That one's just been a hoot. And the stories that go with us acquiring all these businesses are funny too. But yeah, we assembled those right here in Florida. And then the last one was called PM Quilting, and they did a lot of rulers. And so that made a lot of sense to us to expand our ruler base and gave us a lot more lasers. And we also got a great employee who knows lasers really well. So we got our laser expert and our engineer and our quilter. That's who we are. And a year ago, we bought a company called Less Than Traditional. That's the system to make the orange pill quilts. And that one's really different for us because it's a traditional block, and I'm so not traditional. But the reason it fits in really well with us is because we make the templates. And I've been having fun making new patterns and stuff. It kind of expanded us into more traditional quilting too. And then we just acquired a patented system to apply a non-slip coating to acrylic rulers. It's very permanent. It works really well. It's see-through, and it's called Easy Grip. So we're in the process this week. We're releasing this whole new system of rulers that doesn't slip. Boy, it's a lot of fun. And for me, it puts the fun back in cutting because I don't have those rulers slipping all over the place. And of course, it fits really well with everything else we have because we do rulers. So we'll be cutting the rulers, really, again, listen to our customers and redone all the numbers and lines on the rulers. And now we're putting this coating on. So very exciting. And I think we've done enough acquiring and we don't need to do that anymore.
Well, you'll have to let me know when that's finalized.
Well, just 2 days ago, we delivered the first of them. So they're out now. And this coming week, we are shipping out 50 sample sets to stores.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they're ready to go now. We just have taken our time and gone step by step. And like I said, I've been using them. And I'm also doing a little series of videos. We ran one through the dishwasher. I've got one in the freezer right now. I'm going to try to pick the backing off because we really do want to make sure it's a good quality product for our customers. And so far, I'm just thrilled with them. It's making me angry now when I go to use a ruler and it's not one of those, because we've only got 30 of them, I think, we're making right now. And, I like to have a ruler for everything. We're the ruler people, right? So I want that stuff on every ruler because it truly doesn't slip. We're really excited.
That is exciting. You said you traveled to different quilt shows and you're a vendor. How was it to be on the road so much, and how often did you get home?
Traveling to quilt shows is kind of a mixed bag. It did, like I said, kind of fulfill one of our dreams to see the U.S. We've been all over except for to the northeast corner. Massachusetts is as far as we've been. But other than that, we've been, I think, in all the other states. Being on the road and meeting people is great fun. When we were at the peak of doing this, we were only home about 4 or 5 days a month. That's why I couldn't grow anything. So it was fun. You get really good at sleeping anywhere. We still laugh that that's one of the most important traits you have to be on the road, is to be able to sleep anywhere. And meeting people and eating different foods is great fun. And once we're at a show and set up and takedown is a huge amount of physical work. But once we're there, love meeting all the quilters, truly getting to meet all different kinds of people from all over the world. That's really fun. So that's been quite an adventure. When it all came to a screeching halt for the COVID shutdown, it was just shocking. And being home that much was just kind of weird. And we also realized we didn't like our own bed. So we had to replace the mattress because we hadn't slept in it so much. So we've gotten more comfortable at home now here in Florida, and looking forward to staying home a little bit more. Now we're cutting back a little bit, but still want to get out there and meet everybody. And wow, it's so inspiring to go to quilt shows. The quilts that we see are just amazing. You see the ones at the international shows that just blow you away. And honestly, I look at them and I think, wow, I would never make that. It's so hard. It would take so long. It's just incredible. And we also go to just local quilt shows sometimes. And the little treasures sometimes that we see in those little tiny shows that people have made, it might be their first quilt or they never enter shows, just their local. And I just look at them and I think, wow, this is like this incredible artist and kind of hiding in the corner. And you get to see that. And you get to see where people have cut up someone's old shirt into squares and sewn them together, which to me is kind of really what quilting started with, is cutting up the old stuff and making it into something new. And so the variety that we get to see is just amazing. And traveling has been great. We're going to keep that up to some extent, but, cutting down from maybe 28 to 30 shows a year to maybe 10 or so. It still sounds like a lot to some people, but it's time.
I'm sure that's a hard decision on which shows you're going to get to go to and which ones you have to drop.
It is. It's really hard. We're like, okay, we're going to do these 10. And then like, oh, what about that one? Oh, we should really go to that one. We love that one. And we're like, we can't do that.
What was it like to actually acquire some of these other businesses?
Well, like I told you, it was just a conversation with Margaret Miller. The ruler magic, it was funny. We ran into the lady that came up with it and she was selling it. And we just knew we had to have this for our rulers. And I kept ordering it from her. And she was getting mad at me because she was just bottling it at her house. And she's like, stop ordering so much. Because, some people are better at inventing than they are at selling. So I started saying to her, just sell me the company then and we'll take care of all that. So I was ordering a lot from her. And she finally called me up and said, just come buy it. So we did. So, and then the Cheryl Ann's Design Walls, funny story. The whole story of the company is hilarious, but their siblings that owned it, all retired, definitely would qualify as senior citizens. And the two sisters quilted and came home from a retreat and said to their brother, we need a freestanding design wall that we can take to retreats. And so he came up with one. Now, the guy didn't sew. He found a sewing machine out in the garage and some rags and sewed it together. I wish we had that original one, and figured out all the legs and the parts that got it patented, sourced where to get stuff made. And it really was an instant hit. Like I said, they were retired and kind of beyond that before they ever started. And we were next to them at a big show. had a good time, vendors talking back and forth. And the last day, Cheryl Ann came over and she stood next to me and she said, "So do you ever buy other companies?" I said, "Well, yeah, we have. That's how we built this." She goes, "Do you want to buy ours?" Honest to goodness, I had this blank and I went, I have to go see what they sell. I don't even know exactly what they sell. So I walk over and we talked and just had this relationship with all of them, and took us a few months and worked out the details, and we bought it from them. So it's been a good fit. It's been fun, a lot of fun. So yeah, all of them just acquire different ways, usually just a conversation. We've never gone looking for anything. It's just these opportunities have come up and made sense. So yeah, you just got to be ready to jump on things.
Yeah. I put, now that the quilt shows are starting to open up again, are you going to be vending again? But evidently you have been.
It's funny running into people and how they perceive quilt shows and the shutdown, and in different parts of the country too. We actually only went 6 months without doing a quilt show because we're here in Florida, remember? And so we did the 2-week shutdown and then we were done pretty much here. So there was shows in Florida in about after 6 months, but not a lot of people came. People didn't know about them or they were scared to go out. So we did some pretty quiet quilt shows. And so we've kind of been back with it kind of all along. We did use that time to really build up our website too and online teaching. But quilt shows at first were kind of bumpy. Not a lot of people came to some of them. Others were packed. It's changing. The face of quilt shows is changing. And we're doing some different kinds of shows now. But it's been fun. Boy, people missed going to shows and seeing people. It's kind of funny. You can be in a room full of strangers and you feel like you're with all your long lost friends. That's kind of what it felt like at first going back. And so, yeah, it's really kind of made, I think, all of us probably sit down and look at our lives different ways, including for us. And like I said, quilt shows. And travel is not as much fun and not as easy as it was either. And I don't know if we'll get back to that stage or if things have changed, but it's expensive. The prices have really gone up on everything, and hotels and gas and all that. During COVID, traveling was kind of interesting because a lot of stuff was closed. So sometimes finding a restaurant was challenging, and some of our favorite places to stop were gone. But yeah, they seem to be picking up again now. There's less vendors. Interesting. I don't know if you are aware of that. People who were on the verge of retiring just went, "Oh, I'm done anyways." And then, of course, you weren't starting new people for a few years. But this last year, we've started to see more new vendors, and we're really happy. We're encouraging that. We have a really big vendor group on Facebook. And so it's fun. We can all interact and encourage each other and let each other know where the shows are and all that. That's helped a lot, having that network.
Neat. You don't think of a vendor group on Facebook. That is so cool. So you have some programs available. How many programs for guilds and shops do you have available to do?
I just have about 3 or 4, I think. I don't do a lot of speaking with guilds. I love doing it, but they usually need to schedule you at least a year out, if not more. And that's really hard to balance with quilt shows. I haven't found a good way to make that commitment. Quilt shows, unfortunately, almost always take a week because of the travel before and after. So to also work in a guild there, sometimes I can do it in a location that's near the show. I've gone and set up a couple of times for a show, run over and done a presentation at a guild and run back and done the show. And that can work out. But yeah, it's a challenge. But I do have 3 or 4. And then I do teach at some shops sometimes. Again, the scheduling is a real problem. So I teach more at shows. And I have, this year I think I'm doing 6 different classes because you don't overlap. You don't teach the same classes at the same shows. So I'm doing 6 different ones. I'm doing angle play, lesson, traditional, applique class called Horsing Around, a lecture on borders.
If they didn't tell you what you had to speak on, what is the lecture that you would choose to give?
Well, my underlying goal in every lecture that I do is to encourage people to have a good time. Like you said, have fun, but to feel good about what they're doing. And one of the things I always say in a lecture is the quilt police are very real. And I actually have met the head of the quilt police. And if you were to look in the mirror, you would too, because we're the most critical of our work. Let it go. Let it go. I want everybody to stop holding up their latest quilt and going, I got it done, but it's not perfect. Well, duh. We know this. Okay. I don't look at other people's quilts to look for the mistakes. Okay. I look at them, I look at how they use their colors and where it's going and look at how warm and snuggly it is. But I'm not going, oh, wow, you missed a point over there. Or, any little thing like that. So that's really what I like to talk to people about, is standing up with pride. And at Guilds, I like to really address the people that have never stood up and shown off a single quilt and tell them it's time, because you're encouraging other people to try, and people are going to celebrate with you. And if you do happen to know somebody else who is a card-carrying quilt police member, there's two things I want you to say with them. One is, I want to see your badge. Okay. And the other one is, I need new friends. If my quilty friends are telling me what I'm doing wrong and discouraging me, I need new friends. And I have heard from too many people in classes to not believe this, that they have friends that my friends have said, or the teacher has said, or somebody has said, I shouldn't even be quilting because I'm so bad at it. Oh, that's the quilt police. And don't listen to them. Okay. So just focus on that. This is something I do. Focus on that one part you did really well. I will sometimes take a block that just came out really good and put it up on my design wall where I can see it, so I can keep admiring my work. Now, not in a conceited kind of way, but we just tend to focus on what's wrong instead of the joy in it. The other thing I like to tell people is it's okay to put your project in timeout. So I've done that. I've put a project in timeout, and it's amazing. I can take it out a day later, a week later, months later, and I can't even remember why it was in timeout, and I can keep moving on. So if you're having trouble with your stuff not being good enough, give it a little time out. Also, I have gotten halfway through a project or less or more and just decided I really didn't want to finish it. I didn't like it. And it's okay to wrap the whole thing up and donate it. Just move it on, and it'll make your burden lighter. It won't be nagging at you from the corner, that it wants to come out and get done. It's okay to move it on to somebody else who goes, oh, I just rescued this quilt down at the thrift store. And I always laugh when I see it. I'm like, good, you rescue it. Because somebody was done with it. That's really what I like to talk to quilters about, is the reason you do this is for joy and for fun. So keep the joy and the fun in it.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share anything else about your business that I might have missed?
I just really try, and I don't know how to do this better, but I try to let people know that if they can imagine it, they can probably do it. And that's really what we get to do as ruler makers. That is really fun, is help people's dreams come to life. And sometimes it's a pattern and it's a fairly simple ruler or something that they just didn't know how to bring it to a real product, or they didn't know anybody was willing to work with someone so small. I mean, we've done a run of 20 rulers as someone's first order, and we remember those days and we're not going to forget them. So we're thrilled to do that. But we also talk to people that have a big idea and they want to design a specific quilt, but they need some help getting all the angles, a ruler that does this, that repeats. And I just want people to not be afraid to ask for the help that they need. In asking people questions, we've learned so much. We wouldn't be able to be the vendors we are today if a lot of vendors hadn't helped us. And I wouldn't be the quilt designer I am today if a lot of designers hadn't encouraged me to keep going. I was trying to write a book and I ran around and talked to all these people that had written books and looked at their books, and I learned from that. So that's really what our business is all about, is helping people to make their dreams come true. So don't be afraid to ask us to send us a napkin with a scribble on it. I tell people in my classes that there are stupid questions in the world. I hate when people say there's no such thing as a stupid question, because there are. There's incredibly stupid questions. And I love stupid questions because I can answer those. If you ask me a hard question, we might be in trouble. So I always laugh and say, every question is worth asking, because at the very least, you'll make me feel smart, you know? So that's kind of how we approach our customers in our business, that we're happy to help you. We understand there's different learning styles. Just be patient with us. We're certainly patient with our customers, and we love talking to people. So we do have a phone that actually gets answered. I know that's a thing now, that companies don't have phones. That's some kind of crazy to me. We'll talk to you or email or make videos, whatever we need to do, because we're doing this for the joy and the fun of it. And we just love sharing that with other people.
Great. And share where we can find your business.
We are at offthewallquilt.com, and lots of videos on there, free patterns. Everybody likes free patterns. If you go to our little search magnifying glass, type in free patterns and you'll find them there. But yeah, offthewallquilt.com. We're on Facebook as well under Off the Wall Quilt, and a YouTube channel. And we're slowly adding to the YouTube channel, but it's Off the Wall Quilt. So we try to be consistent with that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with me.
This has been really fun chatting with you. You asked great questions, brought back some fun memories. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Julie.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.